It's finally 2026, a new year with new possibilities where society methodically performs the age-old out with the old and in with the new. But now I'm hearing that some people online full-heartedly believe that an advanced ancient civilization had built grand utopian cities all across the world, only to have them destroyed or covered up. The Tartarian theory is the idea that thousands of years ago, a world-spanning hyper-technologically advanced global empire—
The World's Fair. Early 1900s, there's some really weird around that.
Want to talk about the Chicago World Fair?
They said that they built it for the World Fair, but then after they just tore it all down.
spread throughout the entirety of the globe, disseminating essentially all pre-modern types of architecture. Most specifically, believers point to the Chicago World's Columbian Exposition in 1893, better known as the Chicago World's Fair.
72-year-old structure is being beaten to a pulp as 1,800-pound ball crashes against its ancient but sturdy walls of stone.
Everywhere you look, you find a grand oversized scale to everything. Some online users even suggest that the Tartarian Empire was populated by giants. And not the New York ones, okay? This particular image, of which Tartarianists are all up in arms about, was taken in Jackson Park, around the south side area of Chicago while the fair took place. Today, Jackson Park looks less like the extravagant hopes of believers and more like any other modern-day park, filled with trees and a baseball field rather than the grand Roman architecture and vast basin accompanied by an extravagant fountain. The Chicago World's Columbian Exposition captivated the Western world for almost 6 entire months in 1893, from around May to October. Our shot here was pointed towards the admin building sitting in the background of the impeccable Grand Basin, which inevitably catches the eyes of all viewers at first glance. To the left is the agricultural building, holding, you guessed it, exhibitions for agricultural displays. On the right is the manufacturers and liberal arts buildings. 690 acres of intricately planned architectural feats is impressive from whichever decade you're looking at. The expo brought together the most innovative technology of the time. From the Ferris wheel to the first ever electric street lamps, they fascinated Victorian tourists whom had only seen these for the very first time in Chicago. Not only futuristic inventions, but the World's Fair presented a novel vision for the future of modern metropolitan living, which garnered aspects from buildings of the past. Tartarians have a claim on the legitimacy of this theory because of the countless documents, souvenirs, and heirlooms that have survived till this day, though none of the buildings themselves have survived in their original state. But they were meant to feel timeless and everlasting in these photographs, now being passed around on subreddits. All 690 acres were part of a temporary spectacle. A fantasy city crafted to impress visitors whom had only really known of cities as busy industrial centers of commerce and business, while many of the technological inventions from this fair have withstood the test of time, being used societally alongside any other basic necessity. None of the buildings from this fair has. One of those viral innovations being the pneumatic paint sprayer, which allowed workers to efficiently apply any material of paint to large and previously difficult surfaces. So, the gleaming white city, a nickname earned at that time for Chicago's World Fair structures, in a way was only possible because of spray paint. Nice. While for many of us this stands as a reasonable explanation, the Tartarians, like any other conspiracy group, question the facts given. Though in many ways, the ghosts of these buildings and their developers are responsible for the exact form of cover-up and deviance that we're afraid of occurring to the so-called Tartarians. With the start of the new year and the overwhelming access to information in our modern age, conspiracy and historical mysteries continue to run amok, mirroring to that of every sapient generation since antiquity. Society has long been conjuring theories for advanced civilizations of which predate mankind, from the ancient astronauts hypothesis and the Anunnaki to the structures of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. Newly discovered evidence even points to an industrial civilization millions of years ago through geochemical fingerprinting known as the Silurian hypothesis. our aforementioned alleged Tartarian Empire, supposedly pre-existing our own, is no different. The Tartarian theory, also referred to as the Tartarian Empire theory, is a historical narrative that alleges a vast technologically advanced global civilization was systematically erased from history. The theory claims that iconic historical buildings worldwide were actually built by the long-lost empire. Proponents argue a global cataclysm, often described as a massive mudslide or mud flood, which occurred in the mid-19th century for the first floors of Tartarian architecture. Evidence cited often includes half-buried windows in older buildings, which are actually standard architectural features like, basement windows if we're getting down to brass tacks. For most Tartarians and conspiracy theorists alike, research is being on the internet, finding imagery and stringing together chunks of evidence across multiple sources. But most importantly, it's about disproving the sensical, with oftentimes the arguably nonsensical.
Looked into the Tartarian stuff at
I
all?
was watching a video today about it.
So it's suspected that it could have possibly been Tartaria.
That's super strange.
They argue it makes no sense that something so beautiful and grand can just be demolished like that, without even thinking twice. In 1893, the Chicago World's Fair cost a total of around $19 million to produce its almost 700 acres of rec space, which would equate to roughly $600 million in today's economy for only a 6-month project. Seems suspicious up until you do a Google search for the 2020 Summer Olympics in Tokyo, which costed anywhere from $13 to $35 billion just to build the infrastructure for our athletes and fans. Summer Olympics themselves generally only last around 16 days, running from the opening ceremony on a Friday to the closing ceremony usually on a Sunday 2 weeks later. The Columbian Exposition attracted well over 27 million visitors during its 180-day span, placing it among the likes of our Olympic Games. The 2024 Paris Olympics, by that metric, only sold 9.5 million tickets, with an estimated 11.2 million people participating in game activities around the greater Paris region, including attendees of free public events and celebration sites. Therefore, our Chicago Fair attracted a staggering number of people for a fraction of the cost, even in today's standards. Another point of contention from Tartarians are how convincing these buildings are at looking real. Even though to the untrained eye it may seem uncanny, though this may be due to the structural makeup of these buildings that we just don't see much of today. Since classical Roman architecture usually takes decades to construct the elaborate marble buildings and pillars, in order to meet the time constraints in 1893, cast plastering was mainly used over wood scaffolding, cutting the construction time by hundreds of %. If they were permanent, marble buildings are typically made like sculptures.
The emperor of all stones, everything else just has to bow down to it.
Each piece carved painstakingly by hand, and every intricate detail, even irrelevant support and foundation, are assembled into place. Unlike stone, plaster is light and brittle, able to be cast instead of carved, making it able to be elaborately and repeatedly designed in a way predestined for mass production. That's why there are so many repetitious and convoluted ornamentation all across the expositions. Plaster has a completely different economy to it, where the more you have to make significantly decreases the production cost, since a single mold can be used for the same components across all buildings. Just like how you can head on over to Amazon right now to cop yourself plaster versions of Michelangelo's Pieta or David head sculptures for $50 and $30 respectively. But in no ways is that the same from being in Florence and Vatican City standing in front of their marble counterparts. At the heart of conspiracies like these is the fact that people feel a type of way when monumental buildings are demolished, even if they haven't seen it for themselves, like the Arcadian and Goliath National Bank.
Goliath National Bank! Member FDIC.
The Tartarian theory helps its believers make sense of this historical loss. While facts provide clarity in situations like these, they don't necessarily address the emotions captured by these buildings and infrastructure. we have an innate concern for the obliteration of classical architecture, as in some ways it denies a sense of continuity, tossing away a piece of history along with it, while also refuting access to experiencing cultural constructions from our past. There's a responsibility to maintain our cultural connections to cities through their buildings. Even though they may now be real estate, federal property, or unfunctional, its cultural aspects still remain. When they disappear, it often feels like we're losing a part of ourselves, or the city, symbolically or quite literally. What's most shocking is the facets of our lives that hold up so much life, work, and human expression. Literal edifices that seem so sacred and enduring are revealed to be dainty and ephemeral, able to be wiped away and replaced with ease to a degree that we as individuals just aren't comfortable with.
You said it.
And Tartarians? Well, they've evidently latched onto this. Outside of the rumors, tearing down almost 700 acres of a city for a marketing project, there's going to be resentment. People who were forced into rehousing for the World Fair felt burnt by the system. This bitterness curdled and coupled with the already passed down fable of Tartary from novels like A Voyage into Tartary from London 1689 and Zingis, A Tartarian History from Spain in 1692. The exaggeration and dramatization for this loss of destruction, tapping into our fear that some hidden power is controlling which part of history we're allowed to remember. But in some ways, what Tartarians feared the most was actually the other way around. The buildings that they believed had been wrongfully covered up might have eventually led to this system-wide diminishing of character in our modern architectural endeavors. The Chicago World's Fair celebrated the 400th anniversary of our boy Christopher Columbus's arrival in the New World, and was an influential cultural and social event that profoundly impacted American architecture, arts, and industrial optimism even to this day. The Exposition introduced millions of daily visitors to new tech, products, and cultural experiences. From the original Ferris wheel designed by George Washington Gale Ferris Jr. to rival the Eiffel Tower, man's like the OG Michael B. Jordan. With a name predestined to be shadowed from the spotlight, they still managed to find a way. And it's good he did. Name like that, GWGF, even the initials don't got a ring to it. The 264-foot tall Ferris wheel was the fair's most popular attraction, with the world's first commercial movie theater established close by. Visitors got to witness innovations like the first large-scale electric lighting demonstrated by Nikola Tesla and Westinghouse's AC system, the first moving walkway, the first fully electric kitchen, and an ancestor of the fax machine. Many now common foods and drinks were even introduced or popularized, including Cracker Jack, the original caramel corn, juicy fruit gum, and the chocolate brownie. Arguably, its culinary concoctions were just as relevant as its technological contraptions. Daniel Burnham, the architect behind the Columbian World's Fair, was an exceptional salesman. With his spectacular pop-up urbanity, he presented a vision of urban beauty that fundamentally reshaped expectations of what cities could inevitably become. But instead of basing his utopian dreams off of a real city, he chose to build a theme park. At first glance, lavishness fills the eye, but upon light inspection, merely a shell for recreation. Ever since, people have been fooled to believing this amusement park could become reality. They saw these installations and drafts in his pitch as a proof of concept. The fair's unending success only made sure this Pinocchio architecture ran through countless other major cities across the states and the rest of the world. When the wealthy elites and political leaders who visited the fair got home to places like Boston, Detroit, Philadelphia, and DC, they sought to bring home a piece of Burnham's dream with them to their city. They wanted their hometowns to be beautiful, just like Chicago, setting into place the City Beautiful movement of the late 19th century. The moment when urban planning accentuates as a novel field. An attempt to remake American cities in the image of the fair with magnificent boulevards, classical Greek revival architecture, monumental central plazas and fountains, as well as majestic sanctuaries referred to as parks. But there was one problem. In order to recreate these cities to Burnham's vision, they needed to demolish pre-existing buildings for all of that space. Throughout these dense urban neighborhoods, over 1,500 homes were cleared in 1907 to make room for the Exposition and its buildings. And you know, so Rocky could feel like a winner. Cue the music. Tartarians believed that these buildings come from a distant and mysterious society, and in some ways, they were right. The model that the Columbian Exposition, as well as the City Beautiful movement were emulating, actually came from France during their Second Empire. The beauty encapsulated were evidently taking inspiration from the manicured gardens encircling the Palace of Versailles, Place Vendôme, and Grand Trianon. It's clear that Daniel Burnham originally modeled his emporium off of Paris itself. There's obvious mirroring of monument placement and alignment, not to mention the structural architecture in place. At the time of the Exposition, Burnham hadn't even ever been to Europe. Therefore, if you couldn't make do with personal experience, why not involve the specialty of experts? Dan the Man strategically hired a team full of Paris-trained architects to help bring his vision to life. From the École des Beaux-Arts, a prestigious architectural academy amongst locals around Paris, Chicago being at the center of the movement was in line to becoming the Paris of the Prairie. The fair served to showcase its recovery from the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 and the US's rise as a global industrial powerhouse. The many innovations dazzling across the neoclassical buildings profoundly influenced city planning and culture despite its temporary structure. Though pseudo-historical theories such as our Tartarian Empire theory all suggest that human nature defines itself by a lost potential for a highly advanced harmonious existence. This genre, if you will, posits that humans were once part of a golden age civilization that lived in harmony with natural laws and the cosmos. They possessed a profound understanding of science, architecture, and technology, including free energy systems, supposedly, which we'll get into. This suggests an inherent capacity for greatness and a sophisticated, divinely guided nature that current society has conveniently forgotten. Oh, and also giants, in case you forgot.
Droppy! Down here, you great buffoon! Droppy! Brought you some company.
While modern interpretations vary, common themes unite almost all ancient civilization conspiracies. These pseudo-archaeological theories often bridge the gap between myth and fringe science to challenge the standard historical narrative. This, including the Tartarian theory, reject the mainstream historical and archaeological consensus of the time, often focusing on explaining impressive ancient monuments or achievements with extraordinary theories. Adherents claim that a highly advanced global civilization was erased from history and that many historical landmarks such as the White House, Eiffel Tower, and Great Pyramids of Giza were all originally Tartarian power plants or communication hubs. Their central claim lays that Tartarians harnessed ether or atmospheric energy from the sky. Architectural features like domes, spires, and metal finials, or what theorists refer to as antennas, you can't make this up, were allegedly used to collect and distribute wireless electricity to the public for free. Okay, even just from a business perspective, this doesn't make sense. Massive pipe organs in the cathedrals and specific resonant frequencies of star forts are also claimed to have been used for sound-based healing or even as defensive sonic weapons. Proponents argue that the intricate stone and metalwork found in old world architecture, such as that seen at the Chicago Fair, was far too complex for the tech of the time and must have been created using lost high-speed construction methods or synthetic geopolymer stone. The large towers and steeples are often reinterpreted as wireless relay stations or scalar devices used for instantaneous global communication before the invention of the telegraph. Dang, they really didn't go to phones first. Historically, Tartary or Grand Tartary was a generic term used by European cartographers from the 13th to the 19th centuries to describe the vast, poorly understood regions of North and Central Asia. It was a geographical label, similar to East or Southeast Asia. In modern times, the theory has gained massive popularity all across the internet, attracting skeptics from all corners of the globe. Believing that the mainstream academia, along with institutions like the Smithsonian, are intentionally hiding evidence of advanced ancient technology or extraterrestrial contact to maintain the status quo. Claiming out-of-place artifacts or architectural feats were too advanced for the people at the time. From the Great Pyramids to Pumapunku, this pattern has been reoccurring for centuries now. And you can't forget the global cataclysm that supposedly wipes out almost all of these sophisticated global civilizations, leaving only scattered survivors to quote-unquote teach hunter-gatherers fragments of their way of life. Proponents often argue that because different cultures like the Egyptians and Mayans both built pyramids, they must have shared a common advanced ancestor or teacher, ignoring the blatantly obvious independent innovation or architecture driven by similar structural needs. Again, it's not rocket science. Though, what they did miss, which was right in front of their eyes, was the long-lasting impact or cover-up of the Columbian Exposition spurring of modern-day suburbia. From plaster casting to a multitude of conveniency-based inventions to the showcasing of planned, beautiful urban designs that contrasted with the chaotic cities of the past, inspiring not only the National City Beautiful movement, but also popularizing new transit like elevated trains that allowed people to live further and further from central work hubs, setting a vision for ordered residential areas outside dense downtowns, demonstrating that planned green spaces and efficient transport could create desirable living environments, fueling the growing desire for suburban escapes from industrial grime. The fair introduced Americans to modern conveniences from electricity to advanced engineering, but also models for better living spaces, influencing architects and planners to create more livable, less congested surroundings. Coinciding with the rise of railways and electric streetcars, which were crucial for suburban growth. The fair celebrated these, showing how they could connect distant residential areas to a city center, enabling people to live further out while still keeping the benefits of city living. The organized layout and focus on aesthetic appeal provided a blueprint for suburban developers who began creating planned communities with amenities and green environments, offering a utopian escape from the city. In essence, the fair created a powerful visual and conceptual model for a more beautiful, organized, and accessible way of living. Not a grand cover-up scheme to hide away ancient tech. Shifting focus from dense urban cores to planned residential areas on the city's periphery, laid the groundwork for modern suburbia. And also, by the way, claims of free energy, yeah, that's gonna be a no from me. Free energy itself violates the fundamental law of conservation of energy. It's really giving how little they know about physics.
Beautiful building, right?
Look, you are very convincing, and I am very flattered.
Not a drag queen.
From the ancient astronauts hypothesis and the Anunnaki, 690 acres, with a spectacular pop-up with his spectacular pop-up. When they come for you, I will shield your name. I will feel their questions and I will feel your pain. No one can judge. Like they don't know. They don't know. This is my part, nobody else speak. This is my part, nobody else speak. This little light of mine. Glory be to God, yeah. Yeah, the ad-lib wasn't even chance. It's your boy.